Hello, everybody, and welcome to Haiku Talk. I'm your host, Ben Ga, your friendly neighborhood haiku poet. And today we're going to be taking a look at a piece from Peter Yovu from the latest issue of The Heron's Nest with the first line of Alone. Okay, with that said, you know what time it is. Time to sit back, relax, grab yourself a tasty beverage, and let's haiku. Hey everybody, it's good to be with you again for another episode of Haiku Talk, and let's get right to it, shall we? The poem by Peter Yovu goes like this. Alone, a meadow makes me its weed. Alone, a meadow makes me its weed. I love this piece. And if you're not familiar with Peter Yovu's work, you should be. He's one of the greats, and he's constantly wanting us to rethink what a haiku is and what makes a haiku. And this piece does that a little bit by shifting the normal way we think about our interactions with nature within a haiku. And I really like the way that it flips it on its head a little bit. Because normally, we think, or we experience things where there's a reverence, there's a wonder, there's a symbiotic relationship, there's a peacefulness, a calmness, some sort of sense of belonging, or a sense of, we're all part of this greater thing. And in this piece, we kind of see an opposite feeling, a different sense of what it means or what it feels like to be in a meadow as a human. And I like that flip. I also think it's a very well crafted piece. There's a lot of good unforced rhymes in here, and even though it's written in a conventional way, in that it follows the fragment and phrase format that we've seen a lot, with the fragment being the first line of alone, and the phrase being a meadow makes me its weed. And what I like about this is that, the way that I step into this poem is that I'm not seeing that the meadow is being personified per se. I don't think that the meadow is conscious, that the meadow is making the judgment call. I think the judgment call is really coming from the human element, the interaction there, the way we feel stepping into this meadow, and making us feel like the weed. Because what is a weed? A weed, I've often heard described as it's a plant growing where you don't want it to. It's invasive, it can cause harm, it can do damage to other things growing around it, it can take over a garden, it can take over a landscape if you let it, if you don't stay on top of it. And when you think about those kind of qualities, that really kind of sounds like humanity, doesn't it? Certainly a way we can look at ourselves as being invasive, as being something that tends to destroy the environment that it lives in. Not that we don't do a lot of good, but on the whole, we do a lot of bad as well. And so for me, it's more of a reflection on being a human in a natural environment, to feel like the weed that's out of place, that's there, that can do harm. But as we all know as well, sometimes when you let something grow in your garden that is a weed, turns out that it flowers and blooms and can be a nice addition to your garden. Specifically, I'm thinking of a time a few years back when I had a house and I had a garden in the backyard. Did some composting, and through that compost, a couple things happened. Well, we had some cantaloupes that started growing, and also in the midst of that, we had an invasive milk thistle growing. And that milk thistle kind of started growing and got big. But I let it grow because I do like the milk thistle flower. I like the way it smells, and I like the way that when it grows, it attracts a bunch of good pollinators. And then as it dies, it attracts goldfinch that love to pick out the thistle. And then when the plant dies after that, there's a whole array of insects that come in and kind of decompose that plant. I know this because I've let other things grow in the yard, other thistle grow in the yard, and watched that cycle happen. But what's interesting is that as it grew, that cantaloupe, that surprise cantaloupe plant grew, or vine grew in the garden, and one of the cantaloupes grew up underneath one of the part of the thistle plant. And it turns out that was the only cantaloupe that survived other pests and infestation and other things. It was the only one that survived. So I thought it was interesting that the weed in this case protected the cantaloupe, and we were able to eat that. It was pretty cool. And so there's a lot going on in this piece, and a lot of challenging ways to think about how we sit in nature, as well as how a haiku can be approached as an experience of a human interacting with the natural world. So that's very cool. And like I said, Peter does challenge us quite often with how to write and how to think about haiku and how to approach haiku. And in this way, I think he does a good job of doing both, approaching how we think about haiku, at least the kinds of subject matter and the way that the piece makes us feel, as well as having a different idea about thinking about humanity's place in the natural environment. Now let's break this down line by line to show how it's working. And that first line is alone. Alone. And you know how I feel about one-word lines. I love them. And this one, I mean, the word is exactly what it is. It's a single word on a line. It is alone on a line. And the word is alone. And I really like that. It is functioning as, on many levels, as what the word is doing there. I like the sound of the word. I get attracted to musicality of language a lot in my own work, as well as the things I like in other people's works. So I just like the sound of the word alone. It's a good sounding word. And it just, because it's by itself, like I'm left as a reader to feel very alone. I don't have anything to attach myself to in the poem as of yet. I don't know where I am. I don't know what time of year it is. I don't know what time of day it is. I don't have any context except for this word alone. And in that sense, in that sparseness, that's the feeling that I get. The feeling of being alone with that one word on the first line. So it's doing a whole lot of work, and it's very well placed and very well chosen. So beautiful. Line 2 moves into a meadow. A meadow. So now I have an idea of I'm alone and then there's a meadow. And I don't know if I'm in the meadow or I'm around a meadow, but now I have something to attach myself to. And my brain, when I go through my own memory banks thinking about a meadow, I think about a meadow as something that's alive, in season, where things are growing. Otherwise, it's just a dead kind of space. So the implication, the suggestive language here of saying a meadow suggests that it's alive, it's teeming with life. So for me, it's likely a summertime scene. It might be something different for you, but that's where it takes me. So I'm alone, there's a meadow. And I like the sound elements here that complement these two lines. Alone and a meadow. Both lines start with an sound and end with an o sound at the end. Alone, and then meadow. There's an extra beat in the middle, but there's a symmetry there, and there's a coming together there of sounds that I like. And then we get to that third line of makes me its weed. Makes me its weed. Now, I like the me and weed rhyme in there. Again, this is a rhyme only on the third line itself. It doesn't speak necessarily to the rhyme to the o and the sounds in the above two lines. And these rhymes and the sounds feel very unforced to me. They're very well selected, but they come at a natural pace. They don't stick out as being a forced rhyme in this. And I think that's an important thing to point out, because generally we don't want to have a lot of tricks or rhymes or meters or obvious things in your poem that call attention to themselves by showing that they're there for a rhyme. But they can be used very elegantly, as in this poem, where the language sounds very natural, where it just reads as it reads. I wouldn't want to change any of these words. They happen to rhyme. It happens to have a nice flow to the language, and that's part of the editing, the construction, the craftsmanship of this poem, to make these things look and sound and read easily. And that third line, makes me its weed, is that twist, that aha moment that puts the whole poem in context, makes us know where we are, makes us rethink what came before, and makes me sit with this piece a while. And I sit with this poem a while because I have to think about what's going on, and it's an uncomfortable feeling. This is an unsettling feeling to be in, and that's okay. A haiku can make you feel unsettled, and it can challenge the way you think about your place in the meadow. And it makes the poem feel more isolating. I am alone. I'm aware I'm alone, and now I don't feel like I'm welcome. I don't feel like I'm a part of this landscape. And that's an unusual twist for a haiku about a meadow. You know, usually you think of meadows as being a calm place, a place where we can go and reflect and connect to and find beauty in. In this case, I feel like a weed. I feel like I don't belong, or I'm causing harm. And that's unsettling. But like I said, it's good to be unsettled sometimes, and to sit with that and to think about that. And when you're writing yourself, you know, don't shy away from moments that go into those territories, because they are valid experiences, valid things, valid ways that we interact with the world. And you know, if you encounter them, it's okay to write them, and they should be represented. And so all of those things together make this piece a really nice one, and one that really stood out for me in the issue, and maybe want to talk about it, because I don't think that we've had an uncomfortable kind of poem in a while. We've had some on the channel, but this was uncomfortable, and uncomfortable in a couple different ways, which I like. Yep. Alone a meadow makes me its weed. Very nicely done. So thank you all for tuning in. It's been another nice episode sitting there talking with you. I hope you've enjoyed this piece. I hope it's given you some things to think about. And in that vein, if you've liked or gotten something out of this episode, click the thumbs up in the old YouTube. It does help the channel, helps this little haiku talk pop up in interesting places in people's suggested feeds. Think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And if you liked and subscribed, think about ringing the bell to be notified when new episodes come about. With that said, it's time to wrap things up. Until next time, enjoy your beverage. Peace.